It's v.h.s.x. What do you mean?
Alright everybody, welcome back. We got another video suggested by a few of you guys. So shout out to Captain Rex, Zaz as well, and I think a few more of you guys had actually suggested this as well. Circus. So yeah, there's a few of you guys. So if I wasn't able to read you off, just know that we see you. You know what I'm saying? We see you. We know you suggested this. There's a few of you guys that were like really putting this one down. It's the PixelBush video titled Dead by Daylight has a skill issue. Now, I've been talking about skill issues within DVD for quite some time, and this is definitely going to be up my alley. This is definitely going to be up there with talking about, you know, the sort of the game, right? And PixelBush here has a lot of stuff that he talks about, and I'm only going to be talking about very specific parts of it. You can watch the full thing on your own, and it's linked in the description, but we're just going to be talking about a certain portion, and we're just going to talk about it. And the first part I want to talk about is Survivor is kind of hard, because I do disagree with that statement as a whole, but I want to hear what PixelBush has to say about it.
Dead by Daylight. I'll go back to talking about the skill expression of Killer later, but I want to talk briefly about the skill expression of the Survivor role here for a second, because I'm about to say something quite controversial. I think the skill floor of Survivor is harder than most people give it credit for, to learn to play it properly, even though mechanically it is a pretty simple role at its core. Run around the loop until the killer gets close, stun them with a pallet if you can. Optimizing these things can take a lot of time and practice, but in terms of actual mechanical mechanics, there's really not a huge amount for survivors to learn. As long as you can land a flashlight or pallet save, that's about as far as you're going to get, at least before perks are involved. There are things like timing a dead hard, head-on or last stand, and specific mechanical counters to some killers like crouch tech, but at its baseline level, without perks or powers in the equation, Survivor's just not really a mechanical role.
So that right there is exactly what my view on the Survivor side is. Like, there really isn't a heavy sort of like mechanical requirement to play a lot of the characters, because obviously you're not playing a brand new character with a brand new ability that has different ways to use those tools. It's simply a person running away, and you simply press a button to drop a pallet, or you press a button to activate a perk, or you press a button to do something else. These things are not really required for you to actually mechanically be locked in to be able to understand correctly. And the only reason I would say that, at least in the current day and age and patch, I wouldn't say that Survivor's that difficult. Now, objectively, we're talking about in general, excluding all of the nonsensical, you know, meta slop nonsense in the game. There is a level of skill to be had with Survivor, because keep in mind that if it was truly that mindless, they would be 4-outing perkless. Now, the problem is that because of the current mechanics, the current, you know, obviously the perks and things like that and everything else just make everything triple as easy than it would have been. And of course, does not mean that they are required to know these basic things in order to actually be able to perform as well as other people that are good at the game. And that, to me, is the issue with the Survivor side as it is currently, because the gap is being bridged artificially with just a bunch of mechanics. And then the problem is that the gap is still there, but there's a little shaky bridge between it that is getting created from the shards of every pallet that gets broken. And so when that is the case, the skill expression and the skill gap and everything is still prevalent, and still the skill expression is just disappearing as time progresses, because you can be good at Survivor, but you don't need to be. And that's the problem I'm having. Because when you have the overabundance of pallets, the overabundance of, you know, second chance perks, mindless activation perks that just do not require you to really strategize, that's a problem. That's my issue, like at the core of it. Because it seems as if that killers are required to be able to learn the macro, learn the micro, which it's actually briefly discussed in the same video that we're talking about. killers are required to know all these things, and then also required to be able to counter 4 different players with 4 different experience levels on a map that is randomly generated with a lot of areas. So it's requiring a lot of input from the killer to be able to have to, maneuver around 4 different experience levels with 4 different perks each, and then also having to navigate their own character, their own experience with that character, to be able to work around also the map. Versus, like, you can press a button on the other side and fly to a piece of wood, which can be then used, and then you run 3 more steps, there's another piece of wood, and another piece of wood, and another piece of wood, and you're like, where does the expression come in? Where does the interesting aspects of the chase come in? Because as a survivor player, you don't necessarily have to do that much. You can, but you don't have to, is my problem. And it seems like there really isn't a way for killers to do that, where it's like having to, maneuver all these things. Because keeping in mind that you could say, okay, well, the solo queue problem. And in that sense, I have to say, well, in that case, it's not always going to be in your control, but that doesn't necessarily talk about, or speak for, I should say, rather, the entirety of the game and its balance. Because keeping in mind, anyone that's uncoordinated is not going to perform as well as somebody who is, right? And information is going to be the biggest counter to killers. That's why stealth killers suffer against comms and swifts. And with solo, you're just going to have inexperienced teammates. Regardless of how well you play specifically, your team is still a team. You have to work together. That is just simply how a team game works. And so when you have a weak link, or you have like multiple weak links, it's just going to be much more difficult. But that also leads into why Swift is so crazy, because you have people that are able to communicate and strategize around only one person who can try to only able to do so much, is the idea. But let's go ahead and continue.
Survivor skill comes from is in the macro play and especially knowledge pillars of skill. Love the term skillers, I might keep using it. Survivor macro play is very multifaceted and hard to appreciate from the perspective of any one player, survivor or killer. There's a lot of decisions survivors have to collectively make throughout the match, not just for yourself but for the entire team. You have to be able to not just hold a chase, but make sure that you're not running the killer into the active gens during that chase, that you're going down in the right place to minimise the killer's options to hook, and maximise the amount of time the killer has to spend getting back into the map. Don't go down too close to other vulnerable survivors so the killer isn't encouraged to slug.
I will say that I do not disagree that these are things that you need to do as a survivor player. But I will say, though, is that I don't think it's very difficult for you to be able to figure this out. This is something that comes just with game sense and understanding logically how the game functions. And I can't say that this is hard to understand. The only hard part I would have to say is probably the chase aspect. But even then, excluding the whole, every bonus and buff to the pallet densities and the exhaustion perks, or whatever combination of nonsense that we find in the game, by itself, chase should be just as difficult, because you're going 1v1 against another player who has powers, who may or may not know how to use those powers effectively in that tile. But because of the current day and age, because of the patch and everything that we have nowadays, that thing is not necessarily that important. And if we look at the rest of the bullet points here, it says get on the right gens quickly, which can be easily mitigated by a perk, which is kind of my issue. Prioritize unhooks correctly, making sure the right person is getting the pulls at the right time. I do, like I said, I don't disagree with anything that I'm seeing here. It's just a mere fact that they don't necessarily have to worry about this as much because of the in-game mechanics that have already been added. Because you want to prioritize the unhooks correctly, but there's already additional time on the hook anyway, so you don't even need to time it that well. There's already additional time that was added. Correctly handle endgame unhook situations. That one's not too bad either, but like I've also said, they can stack their haste with the additional time off of the unhook. So if you're kind of seeing my point here, these things are true. These things exist. These things are things that you need to actually focus on when you're playing a survivor. However, they're completely nullified, mitigated, or ignored because of perk selection, because of mechanics in the game. It's bad. It's really bad. Pick your teammates up if the killer's trying to slug. Yep, that's also mitigated with perks and mechanics. Finding good resets, same thing, mitigated by perks and mechanics. Taking aggro for your teammates, which is ironically enough not mitigated by perks yet. I'm surprised that they don't have a mechanic for that yet. Knowing the game, they will. And dealing with your teammates, which is just unfortunately how it goes. That's something that's out of your control when it comes to multiplayer games. You can't really choose your team necessarily, man. So that's just understandable. You know what I mean? That is just understandable. And that right there, I think, is the problem that we're having with the balancing of the game. And this is my biggest issue, because I'm watching the game crash and burn because of this. It's like all of these things are what make Survivor interesting, at least from the outside's perspective, because I don't find the Survivor gameplay very interesting. But if you're looking at it from the objective standpoint of like the amount of things that you need to micromanage, especially when you're trying to go against another player and you're both competing in a match in that sense to try to either survive or die, and in the case of the killer or lose you know, your kill or whatever have you. These are things that would make sense, and I can list a whole bunch of to-do lists on killer, right? That would probably have the same length of things to do. But the fact of the matter is that, well, killer has the laundry list of things to do. The survivors don't anymore because of all these mechanics and perks. That's my problem. That's my biggest issue with this game. And my biggest issue with the balancing. It's not good. It's not great that we're getting this awful, you know, sort of removal of skill. I don't understand why they want to do that. But it just is. Now, I want to hear this other point, because this do need to be good. And that, I have a lot to say.
Killers can be a very laborious and difficult process. That solo queue suffers a lot from incomplete information, and all of that is true. But there are also a lot of systems, mechanics, and quirks with DBD's design that mean that getting good and being a skillful survivor just aren't necessary much of the time, and it shows.
Thank you right there. PixelBush literally pretty much just said exactly what I'm saying. Right? Pretty much said exactly what I'm saying. The skill is there to be had. There are players that are good at this game, that are on Survivor, that know what the hell they're doing, but they're few and far between, because the majority of players are Shift W, meta, pre-drop, you know, spacebar slammers. They are not interested in trying to engage with the tile. They're not interested in trying to do those things. And the game does not reward you for doing those things as a killer player, because the most interesting part would be the chase. But you know, the second that the chase goes on a couple seconds too long, you're like, yep, I'm about to lose a gen or two. I'm about to just lose the match completely because I decided to use 5 extra seconds for one chase. It's like, it's ridiculous at this point. And people trying to deny that fact that that's a thing and adamantly claim it's a skill problem are self-reporting. They're showing us that they're not playing at the level that the rest of us are, that are experiencing these things. So enjoy the fun experience of going against inexperienced players, because you are also an inexperienced player. Enjoy that experience. Enjoy that time playing the game. But for the rest of us who have to go against competent players, we're not having fun. Because it's not even remotely a fair fight. It's not even remotely a fair experience. Especially when the killer's supposed to be the power role, supposedly. You're like, which is ironic because they're the ones with freaking superpowers, bro. They're supposed to be these monsters, these villains, these like horror icons, and they all are like a bunch of party clowns. So we're just cosplaying as these fancy movie characters and making all these fun little sound effects for everyone to laugh and giggle at and point at us for, while we pretend we can get a kill and then we just get 4-outed and then we get nothing in return. It's like, what are we doing, dude? At least if we're a party clown in real life, there's a wage. Like, we're going on to a video game to be the party clown for free. The hell is that? You don't even get anything. Like,
shows. It's hard to be good at Survivor, but as I'm sure you've seen whether you play Killer or Survivor, being good at Survivor and escaping your matches are very much not the same thing. Part of this is by design. Behaviour has been doing a lot in the past few years to reduce the skill expression required to play and enjoy Survivor, and this has had mixed results depending on how they chose to do it. Base kit BT to make farming off hook less punishing for the team, the status HUD to give you the info you need so you can make more informed decisions, and to monitor your teammates' actions so closely yourself, the upcoming ability to see your teammates' perks in the match details screen. These are great innovations that have made Survivor much more manageable by removing barriers to enjoying the role that just didn't need to be there. Getting farmed off hook into an instant down from the killer was just punishing you for your teammate not bringing one specific perk, and the status HUD and team perk info lets you make more informed decisions outside of a swift. These technically made Survivor easier, but they do so by giving you the tools to make smarter decisions and have more agency instead of holding your hand.
I completely agree with PixelBush on that. The intention of why these things are added were to make the barrier of entry easier, to make it less punishing for beginners. The problem is that not every single player in this game right now is a beginner. People even with a remotely higher enough hours can utilize and abuse these things with ease, without any effort, because it's simply that easy. And it's just kind of sad. It really is kind of sad. I don't entirely understand why, they're doing this. Because it's not well informed. It's not looking at it from every angle where it's like, these mechanics are good for beginners, but there's no barrier between beginner and expert. Because if they had it so, okay, you're a beginner, you get this, and then the more experience you get, those things are removed, that would make more sense. But it's active for every single player, regardless of experience and hours. So you're just going to be getting constant abuse of these mechanics and things that make it even less interesting to play killer, as it already is.
But there's been a lot of changes made to the Survivor role over the past few years that have just made Serve way more forgiving to play, not by making the process of getting better easier, but by ensuring you don't need to be better in the first place. While this has come in the form of some base kit mechanics like 70-second hook stages and increased pallet density, most of these changes have been through new perks or buffs to existing perks that make the requirement to play or position intelligently more optional than it used to be.
Yeah, I can give it to PixelBush right there because he is able to basically say the same exact thing I'm saying in a nicer way. But I'm speaking to you guys directly. I'm saying it is exactly as what we're all thinking it, and it's directly handholding. It's directly negatively affecting the games as a whole. It's a bad thing. It's not good. You're overly hand-holding the one side and not even giving the other side anything. If there was hand-holding on both sides, then I'd be like, okay, it's a little bit excessive, but at least it's fair to some extent. But you're not giving the other side anything. You're just kind of babying one, and then you're not even caring about the beginner killer players. Which is insane, because it's there's plenty of new players on killer as well, or plenty of people that want to start playing killer that just don't want to because of these changes, because of these numerous things that are causing their killer anxiety, that are causing a lot of stress, that are doing whatever have you. It's not good. It's not ideal. I don't think anybody in this day and age who wants to start playing this game want to experience what a lot of us have to experience on the killer side. So at the end of the day, right, which there's a little bit more here that we can discuss too, but I'm gonna leave that for you guys. I wanted to quickly touch on the whole killer has crutches too, which it does. It does to an extent. But yeah, I mean, it's its own nuance thing. You guys probably can take an understanding of what I mean. I most likely agree with what PixelBush is trying to say here. But anyway, really appreciate you guys listening to this, man. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section if you agree or disagree with the points being made in this video. Hit the like, hit the sub, man. And I'll see you guys in the next one. If you want to support the channel, become a member on YouTube or Patreon, or even subbing on Twitch. I'll see you guys in the next one. All right, let's go ahead and read off these wonderful members. We got Patreon, Crow Vader. All my YouTube members, Brando, Evil Blade, Cap Courteous, WTF You're Not J-Lo, Evil Peach, Cargan Falcon, Dole Whip, Noxus, Zero Mocker, Jack, Christian, and Crow Vader. Really appreciate you guys supporting, man. And if you also subbed on Twitch, just know that you got love coming your way too. Appreciate you guys, man.